Welcome to the BPD Brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I am here with Solène and special guest Theo. Where in the world are you two coming from today, and what is your brunchy beverage?
I'm joining from Dubai in the UAE, and my brunchy beverage is a pear and peppermint tea.
Ooh, I like it.
I know.
So I'm from Belgium and I'm drinking tea with chamomile.
Ooh. I'm coming from New Mexico in the United States, and I'm double fisting water and coffee, so caffeination and hydration. Solène and Theo have both been in a lot of different countries and have different world experiences. So today we wanted to talk about attitudes towards BPD across the world. If this or other BPD related topics interest you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss anything. To start us off, could each of you introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background to the different places that you have lived?
Yeah, definitely. So I was born and raised in France. I left when I was 18 and I moved to a bunch of different places. So I lived in Norway, the US, the UK, then China, then Australia, then back to the UK, and I'm now based in Dubai in the UAE. In addition to that, so living and working in 7 different countries, I've also visited nearly 70 actually. My next country will be number 70. So I love getting on planes and, traveling as much as possible.
I was born in France and I stayed there for like 6 years, and then I moved with my family to Belgium, and then we moved again when I was 16 years old to Brazil, and then I came back alone at 18 years old to Belgium again. And I actually got the Belgium nationality now, so I have the double nationality, and I've been living in Belgium for like 10 years, but I would like to move someday.
Wow, the two of you have lived in a lot of different places. I have really only lived in Germany and the United States. So could you tell me what country it was that you got your BPD diagnosis and like what that process was?
I got my diagnosis 2 years ago in Belgium. I always felt that there was something different in me, and I received 10 years ago the anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. But even though I received that diagnosis, I felt like there was something else. So I told myself that I had ADHD. I thought that I had ADHD, and I talked to a neuropsychologist to understand me better, to do some tests with her, and she gave me instead of the ADHD, she gave me the diagnosis of BPD.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, lots of dissociation, but also some legitimacy. I felt, really legitimate. Like I always felt a lot of guilt for not understanding my symptoms, lots of anxiety as well. So it was really paradoxical because somehow I was feeling, legitimate, as I was saying, but at the same time, when I look BPD on Google, there was discrimination, and it was so stigmatized that it was really hard as well. And in my head, it was like, wow, Theo, you have a mental disorder, and it's not just anxiety, it's BPD. And it was just going into my head again and again and again. It was really hard to live with that.
When you got your diagnosis, did they give you any information about what BPD is?
Not that much. The neuropsychologist didn't really know what to do or what to say. She just gave me the number of psychiatrists to finalize the diagnosis, the label, we could say. So I just came to him 1 month after, because there was a spot available. And I just explained that I was ticking all of the boxes of the symptoms of the BPD. And he said, okay, then it's okay, you have BPD. And well, you don't need medication, you seem stable. So, well, I hope not to see you again, kind of. And then I actually find my own resources as well, looking on Google, podcasts, books. But yeah, I felt a lot of anger for not. I would have liked to know all of that way before, because I was already saying the symptoms that I had, like dissociation, for example. I was saying that to people, to psychologue, for example, for like 10 years, that I was feeling that. And I think it's weird that no one else before it said that to me. So yeah, I felt a lot of anger.
So Solène, I know that we talked a little bit about this on Wednesday's episode, but could you give us a little bit of a recap on how you got your diagnosis, what that process was, and your reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed in the UK 3 years ago, April 2021. The process, it was a bit of a roundabout way. So for the first time ever, I spoke to a friend of mine about what I was experiencing and the severity of it. And he said, hang on tight, I'm going to get one of my exes to call you. And his ex is a therapist. And we had a 1-hour chat. And this person, for the first time in my life, and similar to what we've just heard from Hugh, had seen many different people in a bunch of different countries, said like, hey, like, have you ever heard about BPD? I can't diagnose you, that's not my role, but I invite you to reach out to a psychiatrist and explore this if it speaks to you. So I was very fortunate for that, extremely actually, and I got a psychiatrist appointment through the medical insurance cover at my husband's work, and through that I had a 1-hour appointment with a psychiatrist, went through all the symptoms, tick, 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 just like Fio as well. Oh, you meet, ta-da! And I felt a lot of relief at first, like just a big Excel, like, there's a name for it, you know, there must be other people, like, this, there's something, maybe that makes sense finally. And then very quickly that's Google search and all the stigma and all the fear and all the shame and definitely mixed emotions.
So how much information were you given at the time?
Essentially the list of symptoms, and to say that the most effective treatment would be DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, and that the psychiatrist was not going to provide that, so that I would have to look for my own options, and that also there was no need to medicate, and that was pretty much the extent of it.
In your country of diagnosis, well, I guess first of all, I don't know, did you tell people? And if you did, what was their reaction?
I needed to speak about it. Like, I really need so much. It was like the pieces of the puzzle. Oh, now, thanks to the diagnosis, everything's clear. And I need to talk about this to the world so that other people don't feel alone. And there was actually even like a way of sacrifice. Like, it's okay if people judge me. If I can help people to feel less alone and more safe, it felt for me like it's okay if I will receive some judgment. I can take it, and if it can help other people, then it's okay. So I created Border Attitudes, the Instagram account, on the website, Border Attitude as well, like really 3 weeks after my diagnosis, because I really have so much, I wanted so much to raise awareness about that disorder so that people don't feel the way that I felt during all those years. So yeah, I said it to everyone, to my boyfriend back then, to my friends, but even to my company, to my previous work. I said it to everyone. to my family. I really said it to not someone in the street, but it was like so spontaneous. This was all I had in my mind, I think. And the reaction of the people was actually interesting. My boyfriend back then said, "I love you, whether you have this label or not." So it was really nice. My friends, some didn't really understand what was happening. Like, for example, I was saying that 80% of the people with BPD are trying to commit suicide. And they were like, "Okay, but you didn't." And I was like, "Okay, I didn't, but still, it's a lot to process. It's a huge thing." And I felt like a lot of people didn't really understand what I was feeling. But also some other people, like I felt like some colleagues in work, I feel like they started to act different with me. I feel like they didn't want to talk to me anymore or less at least, because they were afraid of my reactions. And I would have liked people to talk to me, to say, "Okay, Fiona, how can we speak each other so there is not conflict?" But they didn't. I felt like they preferred to start speaking to me because it's easier, we could say. And what I love to do now is when I'm speaking about border attitudes, I'm only speaking about mental health at beginning. Like I would say to people that I'm raising awareness about mental health, and I love to see how people react. Some people will just say, "Okay, well, me, I'm doing sports, and we will just change subject." While others are super interesting. They're like, "Oh, okay, what are you doing exactly?" While I'm raising awareness about mental disorders. "Oh, okay, can I ask which disorder?" "Oh, yeah, sure, it's BPD." "Oh, and what is that? I don't know that disorder." And then it's super interesting to speak with that type of people.
So your page Border Attitudes is in French?
Yeah.
Why did you, I mean, obviously, like, that's your native language, but I know that there's more of a motivation to do that in a language other than English. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
I actually asked myself back then, should I do it in English or in French or even in both? But it would have been too much to do in both languages, so I had to make a choice. But also because there weren't any resources in French. There was some stuff, but from the theoretical point, like from psychologists, but not from people who were diagnosed with BPD. I feel like I wasn't really thinking right. I just received the diagnosis. Yeah, everything was like so intense in my head. I think I really listened to my intuition. It was like, I need to do that, and this is going to work. This is going to work because this is a really good idea, so let's go.
And from the beginning, you got a super fan, because for months and months I had been telling myself, someone has to do something like this in French, you know, and it's definitely not gonna be me, because I'm not that good at the technology and all the social media things. But I was just hoping that someone with the skills and, you know, the story would do it. And when I saw your account, I was like, yes, this is it.
So, Solène, for you, did you tell a lot of people? What was their reaction?
So my initial reaction was the opposite. I did not tell many people at all when I got my diagnosis. For the first year, I told my partner at the time, now husband, my parents, and my sister. So there were 4 people in the world beyond the psychiatrists and therapists who knew my diagnosis. And then step by step, I started opening up a little bit more to close friends. But I was scared. I remember the first time I told a friend in person, I was sweating. I was terrified. I just thought maybe this is the end of the friendship. Like, I don't know. I guess I had a lot of internalized stigma, a lot of apprehension, like how people going to react to, they're going to think that I'm different, or because I was masking so much, like my whole life. And so the people I started telling, the most common reaction was, "What, you? Nah, I can't be. You can't have that." No. they just could not believe that they'd not seen any signs.
So both of you, what have your experiences of, attitudes towards BPD been like in the different countries that you've lived? I mean, I know some of this is not going to be super obvious because some of the places you've lived you didn't know, but I'm just curious, like in all of your travels, and it doesn't even have to be BPD specifically, what has sort of the attitudes in some of these different countries been like towards mental health, and if you know BPD specifically, that as well?
I always like to say that I heard for the first time, or I remember for the first time, the word anxiety when I was 18 years old. So that means that before, whenever I was in France or in Belgium or in Brazil, I knew the word stress. I could be stressed, but I didn't know what was the word anxiety. When I was 18 years old, and I started to have anxiety crisis, which was really, really intense, and I didn't know what was happening. I really didn't know. I felt like I was about to die. And at 18 years old, I understand that emotion exists, that I cannot control my emotion, that I have a body that is not a taxi for my brain, and that, I can feel anxious, I can feel desperate, I can feel sad, and that's okay to feel all of that, and that's super important to reconnect to the body. But before then, during all of my studies, my education, in France, in Belgium, and in Brazil, or maybe I wasn't listening, maybe I was somewhere else, I don't know, but I really didn't know anything.
It's like a non-attitude. Like they just didn't talk about it, period.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. So growing up, mental health for me was like a big taboo topic. There was a family member who had a mental health diagnosis, and the way that I saw that play out was that she just stayed at home all the time, and she was extremely heavily medicated. And so in my brain, I got this information that's, subconsciously, no one ever said anything, but that it's something that you don't talk about. And already at that time, I could feel a sense of like empathy and connection to this person, and that we had certain things in common. But my feeling of the situation, reading of the situation, was that these aspects were to be hidden at all costs. And I think that says a lot about mental health in France in the context of the 90s. Because as I did some research preparing for this episode, and I researched, the evolution of perception of mental health and BPD in different countries where I've lived, the interesting thing that showed up for all of it was how much it changed with COVID. That most countries during COVID realized, wow, anxiety, depression is rising. We need to do something about it. And most countries came with all these plans in place, including France, like subsidizing psychotherapy, creating a fund for mental health, and really focusing on the prevention aspect. So I think there's been a lot of change since I've left. And like I said, I left France when I was 18. So it's a long time ago. So I think it's important to have that context, that it's not just the place, it's also the time. And then if I move to like other countries, so in the UK was, when I first lived in the UK, was the first time I reached out to a therapist there, and I did some psychoanalysis, which wasn't really helpful, and I didn't get any answers, no diagnosis, nothing. Again, it was, the time, it was also the wrong person, I think. Then in the workplace at that time, we didn't talk about mental health at all. I don't remember it being mentioned anytime. Then I moved to China, and in China, there was no mention either. Maybe also because I don't speak Mandarin, so maybe the mentions were not in a language that I can, fully understand. But yeah, there again, I sought out help from a therapist. I had a couple of CBT sessions, and this therapist diagnosed me with like cultural adjustment disorder issues, whatever it was. I can't remember, because as soon as I saw that on my record, I was like, you do not understand how deep this is. And I never went back. And that was a Danish therapist in China. So, right, and nothing to do with necessarily the cultural context. It was in Australia. That was the first time that I heard about mental health in the workplace, because in Australia, they have something called Are You OK Day? And it's a day where, everyone is invited to talk about mental health, to ask each other, like, are you okay? No, really, like, are you okay? Rather than just answer like, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, you good? Thanks. Like the usual that we do, right? And it's obviously an invitation that, is meant to go on like the whole year and every day, but it's just a day dedicated to really raise awareness. And I just fell in love with that. Still didn't have a BPD diagnosis, but really knew deep down that there is something. And I actually offered to speak about mental health, like in broad terms, to the whole of the Oceania region as part of that day. And it was extremely emotional, extremely vulnerable for me. But I really believed in the importance of like, let's have conversations. And I took that on and then made that my career. So then I moved back to the UK, and then because it was COVID times, everybody started talking about mental health more. And I think that helped destigmatize some parts of the conversation, like depression, anxiety, I think is much more, accepted. Depression, anxiety, I think is much more accepted to like talk about and express that you experience. And now I think we have a bit more work to do in terms of, BPD and other aspects of a conversation.
So you live in Dubai now, though, right? So there's one more. Yeah. There's one more on that list.
More, babe. And I think that's really interesting because here in Dubai, like, we're very lucky in the sense that when you come here, you're generally working, and as part of your employment contract, you have access to really good medical care, like for the most part, with obviously some nuances. But with that said, so a lot of people have access to free psychiatric and psychologist care, which is amazing. It's like, wow, like so amazing, honestly. And with no waiting time compared to like in the UK, if you go through like the public system, you have 2 to 3 years waiting time, or you go private, but then you have to pay. So here you get no waiting time, and the insurance, reimburses what you have to pay for the most part. So I think that's pretty incredible. And I think it shows, the commitment as well, again, to make progress in that direction. One thing to note here in the UAE, which I'm still learning, I've been here for a year, is the cultural differences around the perception of mental health. And that will depend so much on where people are coming from. Because we live in a country here where 85% of people are expats from all over the world. So you can imagine 15% Emirati and 85% from all over the world. Mainly number one country of expats here is India. So there's a huge variety of like different understandings, different ways of seeing mental health, and different like treatment practices as well. And one thing particularly is the tie with religion as well, that is interesting to explore in certain religions. And that was even the case if you think about, France during the, Renaissance kind of era. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But the tie with the religion around like mental health, like if you have a mental health disorder, like you might be labeled as like a witch, or as having a demon inside of you, or a presence or something like that. And that still exists in some parts of the religion locally. So, but again, all of this is really, really complex, and it depends so much on like, person to person and different. So yeah, but I'll stop.
I really saw the difference between before and after the COVID. In Belgium actually. So I was in my previous job back then, and the fact that we could start to telework, for example, the flexible hours, it really changed a lot of things, and it made me think of another thing is that Solène and I created a survey for people to raise awareness about BPD in companies at work, and what we saw is that the thing that people would like the most in work will be to talk more about mental health at work, because it will help people to feel more secure, safe, and there will be more performance thanks to that. So I really believe that things are changing just step by step. In France, there is the association La Maison Perchée. Solène, maybe you know about that.
It's a charity, yeah.
So La Maison Perchée, it's a charity. It's mostly for people who are concerned by bipolar, borderline, and schizophrenia disorder. It's helping so much people. It's not there is not medication on it, so it's based on people who will be willing to share that knowledge while having a diagnosis to help people who are feeling less stable, we could say. And it's working so well. There is like a waiting list for it, and it's so nice to have this type of initiative and that they are working really well. I think it's really important.
So is that like a peer support program?
Peer.
Is that what
yes,
that is?
I was just about
exactly.
to say
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
It's like
the name.
emotions matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I followed
Similar.
it. I followed the training, and it really helped me personally, but also to help others. And it's so nice.
Have you had, like, what have some of your experiences been with clinicians and their attitudes towards BPD in the various countries that you've been in?
I think I felt a lot misunderstood. I didn't know back then, but what I was feeling is I was doing an idealization of my boyfriend and then doing a devalorization. And of course, I didn't know by then because it was BPD. And when I was saying that to my psychologist, she was saying that it was a normal thing, that everyone was having that. But me, it was intrusive thoughts. It was all day. Should I break with that guy? Should I break up? If I need to break up, I should do it now because I don't know. It was horrible. And the fact that someone would tell me, yeah, it's normal. Yeah, no worries. And it was the same for dissociation. I was talking about dissociation. I was so scared of that. I didn't know what was happening. And people telling me, I felt lost, I think, because I felt like no one understood me and that I had to do that on my own. I had to understand me and to have the best introspection possible because no one else would do it for me. So it was really hard.
Yeah, I've had a bunch of experiences. So I saw a French therapist in the UK, a Danish therapist in China, a Spanish and an Indian therapist simultaneously, group and individual in the UK, and then an American Saudi therapist in the UAE, and now another Spanish therapist in the UAE. So it just gives you an idea of like the panel, and I think to echo what's been said, the commonality is do they know about BPD? How much do they know about it? And what are their views on it? Because at the beginning, the ones I saw, I got no diagnosis, no nothing, just literally like, talk to me about your problems, or here's a bunch of like CBT techniques to change your thoughts and it will magically change your behavior. Neither of these things worked at all. And I think it's because those therapists just, I'm assuming, did not know about BPD, or maybe I was still masking with them so much that they didn't perceive it. Could be as well. Once I got the diagnosis and I started seeing therapists who knew something about BPD, like when I did the DBT program in the UK with my Spanish therapist and the Indian therapist in group, that was a game changer because they were trained in BPD and they knew how to validate my experience And obviously learning the DBT skills for me was very helpful. I know it's not for everyone, but personally it's made a massive, massive difference to be much more practical. And I really felt like things started to make sense. And very recently I had an interesting experience. So the first therapist I saw here in the UAE, I felt, and again, it's my own experience and feelings, that this person did not understand BPD very well. And so I felt like I was mainly like explaining BPD to them. And when they asked me, okay, so we're going to do a bit of art therapy and you're going to draw yourself outside of the BPD. And that was the moment when I was like, I don't think we're on the same page, because it's not to say that BPD is all of me, but for me, it's a part of me. And it just felt like I was being asked to mask again, which may not have been the intent, but it just wasn't right, because I want to work with this. I want to work with the whole of me. I want to understand how I make sense as a person, not be like taking out parts and then be like, oh, look at this, what am I supposed to do? Like pretty Solène without, or is that not like, it just didn't make sense. And when I tried to explain that, I received a lot of invalidation. And so, yeah, needless to say, we're not working together anymore. And now I started working with this new therapist just for one session. So hopefully it will go better. But yeah, in summary, I don't think it's necessarily the culture. I think it's got more to do with the education and the attitude. And I personally think she felt out of her depth, and I was really, in that sense, challenging her, because I was like, this is where I'm at and I want to go there. And I think she was kind of like,
Yeah.
But that's interesting what you are sharing, and I really enjoy the part about the masking also. And I was wondering for myself how much I was sharing some stuff to my psychologist, yes, and I saw just like you a bunch of psychologists, like I think 10 different at least in my life, maybe even more, maybe 15. With some I was like with them for like 6 months or a year, I don't know. But how much was I masking? I was always sharing that I was doing a lot of sports, that I was eating well, that I was in a healthy body, that I was taking care of not drinking too much alcohol, because I knew that I could otherwise drink too much. So maybe they thought, okay, she's fine. She can manage to do sports 5 times a week, so she's fine. Yeah, I'm fine in the doing. I'm not fine into the managing the emotions. But maybe I wasn't sharing it. I was masking it, and I wanted them to have the image of me of being perfect. So yeah, this maybe it was on me also, we could say.
Yes. Yeah, I can 100% relate to that. Like, I was really scared that if I expressed the extent of my distress, particularly around self-harm, suicidal ideation, that they would then take measures like, sending me to a hospital. And I had seen what that was like in France, because a friend of mine was taken to a hospital when we were teenagers, and I visited her, and that was honestly the most traumatic place that I've ever been in. And so there was a fear, and therefore I think a sensation that there was that need of like pretending that, yeah, I'm not doing well, but I've kind of got it covered, kind of. So it's always that kind of push and pull. How much do I share? Like, what are they going to think of me? What are they going to do as a result of what they think of me?
Yeah.
One day I was listening to a podcast in French my sister sent to me, and she was like, hey, this is about BPD, like maybe you want to listen, because I kept banging on about there's no French resource out there. And I listened to that podcast, and it made me so angry because this person that was being interviewed was this therapist who's supposed to be expert in BPD in France. And they said like this, that if you're in a relationship with someone with BPD, you better end it because it's never going to work. And that was like, I can still, honestly, I can still feel the raw emotion. And we're talking like 2 years ago or something like that when I listened to it. But because I've been with my now husband for a long time, and I know there are plenty of other people in the community. Yes, relationships are hard. I'm not going to deny that. There are plenty of people in the community who have amazing relationships, whether that's romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships. And so to hear that from someone who's held as this expert professional in the field is so dangerous. Because imagine listening to it and you've just got your diagnosis and you're like, oh my God, I need to break up with someone. I need to end my friendships. I need to be alone for the rest of my life because, you know, an expert thinks that it's terrible to be in a relationship with me. I mean, the danger of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Do either of you have any thoughts on this topic that we have not covered in the episode so far that you want to share?
For me, it would be that when I started my Border Attitude, my Instagram account, it was a bit of showing as well, like, do like me and you will be fine. I understood what to do sports, drink water, sleep well, and if you do like me, you're going to feel better because I'm feeling better since I'm doing this. But I was so wrong back then, so it was 1.5 years ago, because a lot thanks to the training from La Maison Perchée, I understood that every path is different. What is working on me won't work on other people, so this is different for everyone. Also that okay, to take care of my mental health will help. To go to therapy is helping. But I think that the thing that is helping the most would be to live in a more diversity and inclusive culture in general. We wouldn't talk anymore about the traffic and about the weather, but we will really talk about how are we feeling. And we will say like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, really? And I think this will help a lot of people with BPD, but also anyone, and also to practice about active listening. Because before I always wanted to give tips to people, like someone was sharing her story, and I wanted either to speak about me or either to give some tips to feel useful. But now I understood, I'm trying to actually not give tips or to ask the other people, what do you want? Do you need a tip? Do you need active listening? What is your needs when you're speaking to me? And I will try to do what I can, taking care, of course, my needs and my limits. And yeah, I really think that this is changing me. And this diagnosis has really changed me in making me, I hope, a more humble person, and to try to better listen to people and not to judge people for their diversity, and to try to include more other people.
Yes, I love that. And I think it extends also to like, yeah, how we can support each other and being really open to like different cultures and really curious, because it's not that simple. Yes, of course, there are some common aspects that we can talk about in terms of like what having BPD means and what being from, say, XYZ country means. But actually, every individual is different. Like everyone who has BPD is different. And everyone who is, say, French is also different. And then you have the interaction like between the two. So I think whether, you know, like for medical professionals, for anyone in this mental health, like advocacy space, and for anyone supporting and or, you know, experiencing BPD, to really remember like to be curious and understand and meet the individual and not put this kind of like easy label or box in terms like, oh yeah, I have a lot of people who say this to me. They're like, oh, but you're French, but you're not really French. And I'm just like, I have no idea what that means, you know, but to them it means something. There's a whole story behind that. And I'm just like, you know, don't do that. Please.
Yeah, it's true. I believe people like to label me, or like whenever they're like, oh, you're not from here. So you're French. Where do you come? Where were you born in France? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm French, but I only lived there in 6 years. But then I went to Belgium and Brazil, and they want to label me. So for now, it's easier because I have the Belgium nationality as well. I can just say I'm Belgium. I don't have to ask question or what. I don't have to. Yeah, but yeah, it's there. I feel like people always want to label me on people in general.
Thank you, Fio, so much for joining us. Where can our audience find more from you if they want to look you up?
Yeah, so it's my account, Instagram account. So it's Border Attitude. And also my website is borderattitude.fr.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really great and insightful conversation. We hope that you, our audience, got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. This upcoming Wednesday, we will be back with a brand new episode topic. If you cannot wait, it is already up on our Patreon for our top 2 tiers. So you can check that out in the link down below, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.